Sponsored by Surfshark. If you were choosing a cell phone in the United States in the early 2000s, the options seemed limitless. Sure, prolific stalwarts like Motorola and Nokia preserved their dominance by churning out model after model, but with cellular plans finally dropping low enough in price for the middle class to afford them, the mobile market was suddenly large enough for players of all sizes to dip their antennae into. Companies like Pantech and Panasonic came and went. Brands like Sony and Ericsson floundered or flourished separately, then together, and then separately again, while LG and Samsung laid the groundwork that would make them Goliaths. In the midst of all this, a company known mostly for its appliances and interesting TV commercials.
Welcome to the world of Sanyo. That's life. That's life. Yeah, that's what people say.
Quietly began to bring the best of the Japanese cell phone scene to the States. Sanyo was behind the first US phone with a color LCD, the first with an integrated camera, and one of the first with video recording, alongside strong fundamentals like reception, in an era when counting bars on a signal meter mattered a lot more than it does today. Oh, and let's not forget, Sanyo also blessed us with the world's most addictive hinge mechanism. But in 2024, Sanyo is gone, done in by the double indignity of 2 acquisitions, with precious little record of the trailblazing devices that set the tone for the way we would use mobile phones for the next 2 decades. Today on Mr. Mobile, let's take a look at a handful of handsets that made Sanyo a name worth remembering. This is one of the first cell phones I remember remembering when I saw it in my older cousin's hand sometime just after the turn of the century. Even all these years later, the SCP-6200 cuts a distinctive silhouette. And when it and its predecessor, the 6000, were still on shelves, it seemed impossibly thin. Of course, we'd seen compact mobiles before. Motorola's StarTAC was well established by this point. But this was for those who liked their phones open-faced, light in the pocket, and with a hint of metal in the form of this magnesium faceplate. Despite its trailblazing design, the 6200 was still a product of its time. At this point in 2001, IP ratings for water and dust resistance weren't yet in vogue on phones, so it was pretty common to see pocket lint infiltrate the space between the LCD and the protective cover. That's no reflection on friend of the channel Jason Rabinowitz, aka Airline Flyer, who loaned me this device along with many of the SANYO'S you'll see in this video. The display itself was a grayscale job, whose 128 by 120 pixel canvas was called large by PhoneScoop at the time, and its standout feature was the fact that you could change its backlight from the typical alien green to an eye-popping orange. Sanyo didn't skimp on features either. Your $300 or so in the year 2001 got you voice-activated dialing, a calendar, voice memos, a calculator, a web browser, and a single game, Crab Catcher.
Wait, why is that different color? Is that poison? Ah, number 1!
The crucial thing the 6000 series gave us is, I think, best encapsulated by Han Choi, reporting for G4 at the time.
Download pictures of people and
Right.
associate them with phone numbers, so when the caller ID picks up, it will show the person's
Show the
picture.
picture.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, interesting. It's
You
a
don't need
novelty,
it.
but hey, it's fun. And that's the point.
Here, Choi was talking specifically about the caller ID feature that would let you assign pictures to specific contacts. But of course, to get the full effect of something like that, you'd need a different kind of display. Now this is a treat. I don't often get to tear into a phone that hasn't seen the outside air since it was sealed into the box at the factory 23 years ago.
Beautiful. Look at the size of this box. So, like, not even that much longer later, like a year later, this is the size of box we were dealing with. Look at this tank. Oh man. Battery life. 2 hours of continuous talk time. Voice-activated dialing. Enhanced internal phone book. Up to 500 numbers. That was a big deal. I think I remember having a phone that like topped out at 99. We got boxes within the box. It's a box for nothing. This is a box for a CD and a charger. Oh, I don't talk about sustainability much, but I sure am glad. CD-ROM! We don't do this anymore. Ooh, belt clip though. Ooh, that's brand new. Data cable. You don't see one of those every day anymore. User manual. Oh, there it is. Oh, I remember these stickers. Most people did not take the sticker off, so people walking around with this like half an instruction manual on the back of their phone. Track. Oh. What a gorgeous piece of equipment.
This is the SCP-5000. It is beautifully balanced, both in its hand feel and its aesthetic, which perfectly encapsulates the early aughts effort to make something quite complex seem at least approachable. When it debuted in the spring of 2001, I wonder if Sanyo realized how significant a foundation it was pouring, because the broad strokes of this chassis would serve as the basis for the company's flagship and mid-tier phones for the next half-decade. The 5000's raison d'etre was this: a 2-inch LCD capable of displaying 256 colors. Now, looking on it with 2024 eyeballs, it is, in a word, awful. Saturation and contrast are so low that, just like my friend Christian over at the Flipside Story, I at first thought this phone had deteriorated with age or was defective. But no, this is just what this particular color LCD looked like in 2001. Yet when I recall the first time I saw one in the dim light of a college bar in the fall of that year, I remember how blown away I was, and how keenly I wished I had the $500 it would have cost to buy one. Well, it turns out I'm lucky I didn't. Sanyo would follow this up almost insultingly quickly with the 5150 in November of the same year, packing a far superior display. It had a deep bench to draw from. In its home market of Japan, Sanyo had been shipping phones like this for years, meeting a demand strong enough to also justify specialty models, like the Hello Kitty edition of the phone. They're known as the C401SA. Catchy. And the real upset would come the following year, with Sanyo's most significant release for the US, the first integrated camera phone. Sadly, the SCP-5300 is rare enough these days that despite months of trying, I could not get a hold of one for this video. Fortunately, the aforementioned Christian of the Flipside Story isn't just the world's most educational vintage phone Instagrammer, he's also one of the most generous. He lent me a bevy of special Sanyo's made for the Japanese market, a cache which included 2 Nokia-branded, but Sanyo-manufactured handsets, as well as the A3015SA, upon which the 5300 was based. Sadly, though, it doesn't power on. But that doesn't mean we can't talk about this camera, because right alongside the 5300, I have a 5500 from just 1 year later, which sold for almost the same price and packed almost exactly the same camera, whose photos I've somehow been able to preserve for 20 years, because yep, I owned this one. Just take in that early aughts 640x480 VGA goodness. For context, my Olympus digital camera of the same period was able to do a much better job of capturing the same collegiate chaos. Camera phones had a long way to go. Reaction to the very notion of a camera phone was predictably crotchety from many corners of the commentariat, but even as early as 2004, it was clear to some of us that despite the poor quality and cumbersome sharing process, every phone worth talking about would soon have a camera built in. In fact, Sue Chan, writing for CBS News about her visit to the CES 2003 trade show, kicked off her story on the 5300 with a quote that Steve Jobs may have drawn inspiration from just a few years later. Chan writes, "I picked up a lot of gadgets. A digital camera, a calculator, a cellular phone, a portable web browser, a pocket-sized game console, an email terminal, a device that keeps track of phone numbers and appointments, and a handheld device for downloading and listening to music. But what's unique about this collection of mobile toys is that they are not several separate gadgets, but one single 4-ounce device that fits easily into a shirt pocket."
An iPod, a phone, Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device.
The 5300 was well reviewed, and Sanyo was able to scale its success by building a cousin called the 8100. This chunky little clamshell shipped with an utterly awful 0.1 megapixel camera, but it also cost just $99 on contract, which meant I saw the 8100 in so many hands beginning in that summer of 2003. Seriously, it was everywhere. The 5500 stepped up the game with a camcorder mode that allowed you to capture 15-second video clips, as well as more features like a loud, if half-duplex speakerphone, and a programmable LED that lets you assign different colors to different notification types, and it seemed like Sanyo was finally managing to keep pace with, if not quite eclipse, its rival Samsung. Sadly for Sanyo, that parity was destined to be short-lived, because the end of 2004 would drop 2 big disruptions on the company that would see its fortunes change forever.
By now, I think most folks understand that a VPN is something that keeps your browsing safe and your privacy secure. Something that lets you watch your favorite shows and access your favorite websites, even if you're traveling to countries that might block them. But what a lot of people don't know is how simple using a VPN can be. That's a big reason I've been using my sponsor Surfshark for 5 years running. Surfshark gives you easy one-tap security on unlimited devices for one low price. That means you can use it anywhere, from your Android phone to your MacBook, iPhone to Windows PC. And Clean Web is included too, so you get to see the web as it looked before publishers stopped pushing back on advertisers. Secure your privacy with Surfshark. Visit the link in the description and use coupon code MrMobile for an extra 4 months. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. The Chuetsu earthquake of October 2004 killed almost 70 people, injured thousands more, and caused severe damage to the infrastructure and economy of Japan's Niigata prefecture, including Sanyo's main semiconductor fabrication facility. While the company struggled with the loss of $837 million in the wake of that natural disaster, a competitive disaster was also looming. Motorola's Razr V3, announced earlier that year and finally hitting shelves as 2004 came to a close. Overnight, the Razr made everyone else's predictable, pillowy flip phones seem pedestrian by comparison. Samsung was quick to respond with the A900 I covered in another episode of this series, which dropped just a year later, but Sanyo lagged behind, waiting until the summer of 2006 to launch an even more blatant Razr copy, the Katana. It was attractive and distinctive, with a beautiful display and Sanyo's trademark hinge. But the Katana didn't measure up. Unlike the Samsung, it had no MP3 player, and its camera bore the same VGA resolution as the 4-year-old 5300. And Motorola wasn't standing still. Its newer Razrs already included media players and megapixel cameras by this time, with even more advanced models on the horizon. Sanyo, meanwhile, saved those features for its MM9000 series, here in its special edition livery for the short-lived ESPN mobile network, thanks to AppNerd for this loan. A wonderful device, to be sure, with removable storage and a mature feature set, but in a package that by 2006 felt pretty played out. More challenges, of course, were just over the horizon.
Are you getting it?
The smartphone revolution was starting, and Sanyo, kept making Katanas and 8000 series clamshells. As the competitors' fit and finish, build quality, and software elegance all improved, Sanyo suddenly seemed to be standing still. The company's interface had always felt less polished than its rivals, with chunky fonts and pixelated battery meters, and a scattered arrangement of buttons compared to Samsung's much more unified control collective. And for several generations, Sanyo even failed to include an alarm clock. On the hardware side, the glossy, cheap-feeling plastics got tougher and tougher to ignore, as did the exposed screw holes. There were all these little details. For years, competitors like Samsung had used clever magnetic or hinge switches on its flip phones to turn the screens on and off invisibly.
But as late as 2008, Sanyo was still using this crude external peg and hole assembly. Meanwhile, most competitors had long since closed the gap with Sanyo in RF performance, which itself became less of a differentiator as cellular networks matured and reception wasn't as big a deal. But none of that contributed as keenly to the demise of the American Sanyo phone as the company's laudably loyal commitment to dancing with the one that brung him. From the beginning, Sanyo was a Sprint exclusive, and from the beginning, Sprint was never the biggest or the best that the US had to offer. The carrier was middle of the pack for nearly the entirety of its time in wireless, and the big bet it made to change that, the $30 billion acquisition of Nextel in 2005, blew up in Sprint's face so completely that it went down in history as one of the worst mergers of all time. I've got a video on that, which I will link at the end. This combination of challenges proved too much for Sanyo's mobile division, which was acquired by Kyocera in 2008 for around $400 million. The following year, the rest of Sanyo Electric was gobbled up in a deal that brought the company's legacy full circle. See, Sanyo had been started in 1949 by an employee of Matsushita Electric Housewares Manufacturing Works, which would later achieve global renown as Panasonic. And it was Panasonic which would spend $9 billion to bring Sanyo's story to a close. But that story lives on in the memory of those of us who spent time on America's middle-of-the-road wireless network in the mid-aughts, which carried the benefit of also spending time with some truly superior Sanyo cell phones in a time of true trailblazers in mobile history. When cameras and phones first came together, when hinges locked and antennae extended, and phones were fun. Folks, please join me in offering massive thanks to all 3 donors whose device loans made this video possible. And if you're a fan of this series, but you're not following the Flipside story on Instagram, I don't know what you're even doing. The link is in the description. And if you're interested in more stories from this era, check out my episodes on Nextel and the first camera phone I ever bought, the delightfully odd Samsung A600, right here on YouTube. As always, no manufacturer had copy approval rights of any kind concerning this content, nor did any manufacturer furnish a fee for its creation. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the MrMobile here on YouTube. Until next time, from Michael Fisher, Captain Two Phones on Threads, thanks for watching. And stay mobile, my friends.